Hi, I'm Chuck Gibson. This is Taking Stock with Art Jarvis, a bi-weekly discussion of what is happening in the economy, the world of finance, and personal investment with Art Jarvis. Taking Stock with Art Jarvis is a presentation of Loveland Beacon in partnership with Jarvis Global Investments, LLC. Now here is Taking Stock. Welcome, Art Jarvis. Taking Stock, episode 52. Congratulations. This is our 2-year Taking Stock anniversary.
Champagne's popping open, sparklers are sparkling, fireworks are popping off. Who would have thought we got to 52 episodes?
And that was all before we turned the recorder on.
Yeah, right.
Now we're stupid, silly, drunk with the champagne. Who knows what we're going to say today? Yeah. But hey, listen, welcome.
You're having a stupid, silly, so it's fine.
Well, welcome back once again, and you know what? 2 years. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. We talked a little bit beforehand. You make this show. You make this show easy. Keep it flowing well, and from a guy who can be a little scatterbrained at times, it's a huge appreciation for that. So, I couldn't be happier that we're 2 years into this thing. So
it goes both ways. It can't. I appreciate the compliments, and I'll take those. But again, it doesn't happen without you and the insight that you can bring when we're talking about taking stock. Mm-hmm. So I have to start. We're not going to change the whole thing now. So 2 years. So how are you?
I am fantastic.
Perfect.
Yeah. So a lot of celebrations here in the last few days, actually. So
yes, I know. For the listeners, and we told 2 weeks ago, we suggested that between then and now, that Art Jarvis would celebrate a milestone birthday. We didn't tell him milestone, but I just did. A milestone birthday. And so the celebration continues. The birthday was actually Friday, right?
It was, yes. Big party on Saturday, big surprise party. I was very surprised, and had a great time. And then here we are on Tuesday celebrating another milestone. So with 52nd episode. So it's been a good few days.
That's a lot of champagne, brother.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, listen, and I would be remiss to not say part of the Jarvis Global and directly part of the Jarvis family. So thank you so much to the Jarvis family for including me and mine to participate and try to pull off a surprise. I didn't spill the beans before Saturday night's big surprise party. I loved it entitled The Art Show Birthday.
Yeah, they did a good job of coming up with the theme of it. So everything which is art,
and it was great. You know what? I know, as you have said, as you've told us when we were talking, before we went on here to record, how you enjoyed it, but so did we. And it was just a lot of fun seeing the people, the efforts they made to tie in the art theme. And as you said, what was really cool, and you only know this, was many of them were able to tie that art theme into also their history with you, whether as a client or a friend or a family member or whatever. A lot of interesting things.
Yeah, there was a few inside jokes in there that only I and maybe a few other people knew. So you might look at it and go, "Oh, okay, that's cool," but not really understand the whole background behind that. So it was good, and I'm equally. I do take great pride in the fact that I'm not easy to pull one over on. Okay, so that was a lot of people who kept a secret for a pretty good sense.
Well, very politely said.
I think it was. I'm not sure the invitations or something. I think didn't they go out in March or something like that, March or April, or the process started. So people have been keeping a secret for at least a pretty good amount of time.
It's on my computer still, that first invitation.
Is it?
Or the first notice of the invitation. Because there was a couple of reminders along the way.
Okay. Yeah, I asked one of the kids when did the invitations go out, and I think the response was the first thing went out in March or something. So that's a lot. That's 3 months. That's pretty good. But no, it was a great time, and definitely was touched. By the show of love. So it was
nice.
Great. So
Well, for the Taking Stock listeners who have tuned in to this second year anniversary episode 52, and you're trying to figure out, why are we talking about this birthday celebration? How does it tie in? Well, the secret is that, so I was there and I met some of those clients, and you may have some surprise guests on Taking Stock. So for the listeners, and these are people who can share the story of, the investment that we talk about, especially to any of you younger listeners, that we've said this and we've pounded it in, and you're tired of hearing it, but if you're not already doing it, start that investment plan, no matter however much or however little you can put consistently forward, and what a difference that'll make. If you're 20 years old, 30 years from now, at 50, you'll be amazed. And that there's all kinds of charts and things that say invest now, don't wait. Just whatever you can. And so it was fun to meet some of those, we'll say, your original clients that have been there for the 35 plus years.
Client number 1, client number 2, client number 3, they all were there. So the 30s, some clients are 30 years plus. So it's but we tend as humans to make things more difficult than we need to make it to be. But what you're saying is exactly true. If you start early, you don't have to put that much away to be very successful by the time you get to retirement. If you have 35, 40, 45 years, depending on when you want to retire, you can, if you just do it slow and steady and leave it alone, guess what? You're there. You win the game, and you'll have a very comfortable retirement. But as you said, there are some things out there. If you wait 10 years before you start, that 10 years of compounding, the eighth wonder of the world, that 10 years of compounding makes a huge difference. I mean, you have to put away a much bigger number if you start at 30 compared to if you start at 20, right? So, but there is a saying out there that yesterday is the best day to start investing, and today is the second best, right? So, but there
were a whole bunch of yesterdays for me before I finally found that day where I said today was the best day to get going. And that was, thankfully that's been a while ago too. But
But the other thing is a lot of times we're provided with unrealistic expectations. You'll hear someone say, "Well, I know I have to have $2 million before I can retire." Oh no, that is absolutely not true. Okay. Some people might need $2 million to retire, okay, but the vast majority of my clients don't need $2 million to retire. I've got a client, I said before, I've got a client who retired on $250,000, and she is absolutely living her best life.
Well, this is what, it's so funny how these things work. My question, or comment and question that followed, was going to be exactly that. 2 weeks ago, you mentioned the client that was, retired on $250,000, and that really raised my eyebrows, because the 20-year-olds or even the 18-year-olds, whatever, the young people that we're reaching today that are taking advice and getting going, and that will consistently stick with it and will be in terrific shape by 50, 60, 65, whatever, as you said, if they want to wait 30 years or they want to wait 40 or 45 years, whenever they're ready to retire, they'll be in good shape. But maybe you've also had that client that came to you when they were already 40 or something, and maybe the number's a little bit less. But it doesn't mean that can't bring them a successful, better word, a comfortable retirement time when they can stop. $250,000 isn't $2 million, but it's not a couple of pennies. That's nothing to shake a stick at. $250,000 you can apparently live on.
Yeah, and like you said, if you start early, it's easily attainable.
That's wonderful.
Right. Yeah. So it's again, it's expectations, and again, it depends on how you live your life. If you have debt, that might be a problem. If if you've got 2 Mercedes sitting in the driveway and you're jetting off to Europe a couple times a year, guess what? 250 might not get it done for you, right?
Right.
But I'll say it again. I always talk about go and talk to the kids at schools and things, and talk about put away $100 a month. You put it, you start at 18 or 22. Say you start at 22, come out of college, you put away $100 a month. That ends up being somewhere between $600,000 and $700,000, depending on how you have it invested. By the time you retire, okay. Well, if you put away $100, let's say now you're working, you have your first big boy, big girl job. You're putting away $100 a month, but guess what? Maybe your employer is matching that $100. So guess what? Now it's $200 a month, and now you're talking about 1.2 to 1.4 million, right? And now you're only, but even then you're only talking about $200 a month. Even at 20 years old, if you have a 401k at work, you have the ability to put away up to $23,500 a year. So we're talking about $2,400 a year, and you could put away 10 times that amount. So again, we're kicking a dead horse here, but I mean, it's so easily done, and all you have to do is start.
Well, we hope the horse isn't really dead.
Well, no, he's just
you know what? If we've already reached you and you've heard this enough, then that's great.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. You are going to find yourself in a surprisingly comfortable position down the road from now. But we're not the dead horse we're not kicking is, hey, if we're still kicking you to get you to start making that investment, I hope you hear this and I hope it reaches you, whoever you are, and that you can start, Art says $100, if it's $25, whatever you can put away, start putting away. It was my mom all those years ago that said, and you know what was really cool for me, and for my brother and my sister too, was she didn't just say you should do it. She opened an account for each of us, to get us going, and said, hey, and she even said, you know what, just $20. You can afford $20, Chuck. So that was that was when I was in college. So of course I have now. God bless her, and God rest her soul. But of course I didn't listen, for a while. I mean, it was there. The message, I heard it, I understood it, and it did land. I didn't really start to consistently give, and I would be so much better off if I had. But still, that's the message. Hopefully you're hearing it wherever you are. The other thing that stuck out from 2 weeks ago is, and I think I said, wouldn't that be wild if in 2 weeks we're back at over 6,000 for the S&P? So what can you tell me about where the S&P went?
I think when we started talking, we were at 6,020 on the S&P. So here we are, and again, we can repeat it. Middle of April, sometime in April, we were at 4,850 on the S&P 500. So we have come back 20-something%.
Basically in 6 weeks, 7 weeks.
Yeah, somewhere in there. The bottom was when we did the special report. So sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. But
I could look that up right now and tell everybody when that was.
But we've come roaring back. I mean, and the interesting thing about the last 52 episodes is the nice thing is, or the bad thing is, how you want to look at it, is the market has provided us with some interesting topics. Right.
Oh, for sure.
We for since 2022 maybe, all we kept talking about was the recession that was coming. And it kind of died down during 2023 because guess what? The recession never materialized. We're sitting here in 2025 now. We do have one quarter where the market was down. The economy was down 0.3%. So that's the first quarter of a potential recession,
right?
But we're not even in a recession now. And based on the returns we've had, honestly, I would probably be surprised if we get that second negative number for the second quarter of this year. So still not there. So
well, I don't know the big numbers like you do from everything, but but Chuck's numbers, I looked, and so April I was up, and May I was up. So the quarter ends at the end of June for me.
Yeah.
And that's going to be up in April, up in May, and June's off to a good start.
Yes, it is.
So if we continue on this pattern, the recession falls by the wayside again, because the second quarter consecutive isn't going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
That's the message, right?
And then all of a sudden we're all better, at least until someone says something else. But
and that's the next question, Art, is okay. So it's great to sit here and say, boom, we did in fact go from, we got back to whatever it was, 59 2 weeks ago,
right?
And are we going to get back to like over 6, headed for that 62, which was the high in
February 19th,
right? Yeah. So anyway. So give a little bit of whatever you can in terms of why did that happen? I mean, obviously you've been doing this for over 35 years, and the ebb and flow of the market, and that at the end of the day, the general average is a certain amount of return on average. You've seen it over the decades.
Right.
So, but how do you explain that drop?
Yeah.
Which we've talked about, so you don't need to explain that today. But getting to the 48.50 in April, and then climbing back up in this, we'll just say 7 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, and you said it. It's fear and greed. Fear,
right?
Fear. People don't like pain. Okay, and when it starts to feed on itself. And, granted, there were things going on in our government and the geopolitical scene and things like that was causing strife. I get it. We took, from a tariff standpoint, we took a rip the Band-Aid off approach to things, right? It wasn't the kinder, gentler approach. It was the harsher approach. So, but it quickly fed on itself. So many misleading stories and so many misleading ways of looking at things, and quickly we're down 20%. In 2 months we're down 20%. Well, even if we did slip into a recession, we've already taken 20% out of the stock market, right? But then I think a couple of things happened. I think finally people started to come to the realization and calm down a little bit that we've taken this way too far. Number one, that even if a bad case scenario happens, we've already taken 20% out of the market. But at the same time, we started to get a little bit of a softer stance on the tariffs, too. So instead of having 145% tariffs, we took them down to some countries, back down to 10% and things like that, because they were coming to the negotiation table. So I'm going to assume, I don't know Donald Trump, but I'm assuming that's what he wanted. He wanted people to come to the negotiation table, and that's what's happening. Still some back and forth with China and things, but not only did you take the market down to the land of ridiculousness, but at the same time we started to get some positive news. Okay, and then we started to get some positive economic reports. How the tariffs are going to be so very damaging to our economy. Well, guess what? It still hasn't materialized. Right, the numbers that were being thrown out there, and how bad it was going to be, and what it's going to do to unemployment, and what it's going to do to our economy, and what it's going to do to inflation. Well, guess what? The inflation numbers have actually declined. The employment numbers are still at the natural rate of unemployment, so we haven't seen a spike up in that. So not only did you go too far, you started to come back, you started to get some positive news, and you just keep getting economic reports that don't support the rhetoric. So that's how so now we're, in my opinion, we're at least back to where we should be, and probably should actually be a little further than where we are now, that we're almost halfway through 2025.
Right.
So you look at the earnings projections and things like that, at the beginning of this year we were talking about what we thought what this year was going to look like, and I think I threw out the 7,000 number on the S&P. I'm not pulling back on that. I still think that's a possibility. And don't forget, every month, every day, we drop off earnings reports that we already know and start adding projected earnings reports. So that earnings number should keep going up. Projected earnings number should keep going up too. So very long-winded way of saying that, we got somewhere where we shouldn't have been, and we worked our way back to probably where we belong in the first place.
Yeah.
So.
I was going to say beforehand, today I haven't said the word, and maybe we won't because it's been one of those. But in your response just now, the word came out naturally, obviously, which was that daggone tariff word. Mm-hmm. Recession was already part of the discussion too. Those are when you say there's a couple of topics, and there are a couple things And my favorite word from you is the ridiculousness. Ridiculousness. But it seems that in that realm, the economic world, global economic world, the ridiculousness may have settled a little bit, and that fear factor, and then that greed, other side of that fear and greed factor overall has maybe settled out a little bit from what you just explained. But I have to throw in, so we have some ridiculousness going on. We would be remiss on this Tuesday, June the 10th, if we didn't mention the ridiculousness with regard to what's happening in Los Angeles, and apparently on some scale in other major cities across the U.S. with regard to the protest of the actions and we'll just say the actions of ICE, regardless of if they want to blame it on Trump or they want to, or whatever the case may be. But this situation regarding the detaining and maybe ultimately deporting of immigrants. So the question that comes from that for taking stock, and I don't necessarily know that you're the expert on it, but what do you see in terms of your experience? And wisdom has come with age, right?
We're supposed to, anyway.
But anyway, so Art, the question goes to this. Should whatever's happening with that also show up in the economy? I mean, how does that impact what happens to the investment market?
Yeah.
The money markets, whatever.
Yeah, so if you're looking at the markets, once again, we'll go back to uncertainty.
Okay.
Markets don't like uncertainty, and what's going on out there is uncertainty, right? But what's going to come of that? Now, do I think it's not going to have a global impact on the global economy? It's probably not going to have a huge impact on the U.S. economy, okay? Other than maybe people getting nervous and backing up a little bit. But it will most certainly have some impact. If you're closing down downtown Los Angeles, guess what? It's going to have an economic impact in California, right? So, there's no doubt about that. But I think it's still more the uncertainty of things. And we've talked about this before. Okay, so maybe we have worked our way through, and the tariffs aren't what they were first feared to be.
Right.
Okay, but don't forget that there's still going to be another 3 years of this. Okay? There's going to be 3 years of things are going to be dealt with in a certain manner, and it's going to cause volatility. That's just all there is to it. But you gotta be able to sort out what is important to, and again, I'm talking about just the economy. This is an This is an economic financial show. What is what happening going to have a direct material impact on the U.S. economy or even the global economy? That's what you got to sort out.
And that's the clarity to the question I was asking. What if any direct impact can it have on local? And you nailed it. The answer number one: direct impact on local economy. Well, if protests, violent protests, riots happen in downtown Los Angeles, businesses are closed and impacted. That's a direct impact. How it spreads from there, that's the clarity to the question is, does it have a direct impact on the local economy wherever things are happening, and does it go beyond that to our national economy? And as you said, it's not something we would expect to have an impact on the global economy.
No,
that's going to be local and national.
Yeah, somebody'd have to really do something really stupid in order for that to happen. But you know who does well throughout all this, and will continue to do well, is attorneys and lawyers. right? Because every single thing that's going on and every single thing that will continue to go on will be challenged in court, right? I mean, the Los Angeles thing, guess what? They went to court. They're going to make some decisions like, can you do this, can't you do that? And that's what we're in right now. We're in a whole bunch of, is that legal or isn't that legal? 'Cause,
correct.
This administration is testing some things out. Let's be clear about that. So.
Well, going back to, and you made the most key point for our discussion here and for the listeners listening in, is this is a financial and economic show.
Right.
We're not talking about the political landscape. We're trying to decide that, or the impact on the people, because there are some very real impacts both ways.
100%.
Whatever side of the argument you're on, there's some real impact. How do you? I was going to say the other key word before I ask the question. The other key word, obviously, is, as you said, uncertainty. Mm-hmm. So how do you we did the special report, there was a reason, and we like to think that had some impact on telling people, hey, you know what, the markets are closed this weekend, take a breath, Right. So here we are with some uncertainty building, some tensions building, whatever, that are more political and geographical and all that. But what's the message to the people to, don't let this uncertainty impact your financial decision making?
Right.
What's that? How do you?
No, you're 100% right. You have to be able to separate the financials from the politics, or the financials from the personal feelings. And really, there's investing for you right there. If you can keep your personal feelings and your psychology in check, you end up a lot better off. Okay, people. Unfortunately, it's true, and they'll show you the statistics that if the S&P 500 gives you 10% per year over the long term, generally people don't make 10% per year because they're constantly getting in near the top and out near the bottom. I mean, it's just I'm not trying to be nasty about it. It's just a fact, and greed feeds on itself. So people now have the fear of missing out. And they start getting it in toward the top, and they've been out during the
best time to buy and get in.
Yeah. And then the same thing with fear. I can't. You'll hear people say, "I can't take this anymore. I'm getting out." I mean, those are quotes, and you know what? When I start to hear that more often than not, I know it's time to get in.
Right.
People are throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So you gotta. Again, I'm not discounting the way people feel about things and things, but a lot of times people maybe take a political stance, but they let it carry over into a financial. Now, some places they do carry over, but a lot of things that we're dealing with right now, they're two, in my opinion, at least at this moment, they're two different topics.
Yeah. Well, if I listened, I hope I was listening. To us in the conversation we're having, I heard you say that we're not at the top right now. We're not at the bargain when we had a nice Friday special report all those weeks ago. We're not at the $48.50. So you missed your bargain purchase if you didn't jump in then and buy. But we're not at the top. If I heard you correctly today, This market is still growing. This economy is still growing, and so the message would still be, we got about a minute left. Okay. So the message, what you want to share, is up to you. But what I heard is we're not at the top. It's still a good time to buy in and benefit as we're growing.
Yeah, I mean, especially and what you buy is important. Okay, where are you in your life cycle? Where are you? Are you close to retirement? Not close to retirement? But you always look at liquidity needs, you look at time frame, and you look at risk tolerances. Okay, but if I'm a betting man, or I guess I am, do I think that we're going to be better off today than we are better off a year from now than we are right now? At this moment in time, based on what I'm seeing, the answer is yes.
Liquidity, time, and what was the other one?
Risk aversion or risk tolerance.
Risk tolerance.
Yeah.
I wanted to remind me, but I also wanted to remind think about your liquidity needs and the time of your life, so to speak, or the time reference, and then the last thing, of course, is your risk tolerance.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you could be 20 years old and I tell you should have your foot mashed down on the accelerator, right?
Yeah.
But if your portfolio goes down 5% next month and you can't sleep at night because your portfolio went down 5%, well, guess what? We probably need to tweak things a little bit, right? So you probably need to make things a little less volatile for you because, you might be 80. And you have your.
I'm not.
And you mean the global you. I mean, you could be 80, and you can, if you don't have really don't need money on a monthly basis, and then really your time frame maybe becomes extended because really this is family money and it's going to be passed on, becomes generational money or something like that, and you just don't care if your portfolio is bouncing up and down, so your risk tolerance is very high. Well, you could be 80-something and be 100% in the stock market.
Wow.
So
that's a great point.
Well, that's why you can't just if I walk into XYZ brokerage, well, hey, Mr. Jarvis, you're 60 years old, so you should be this. Well, you don't even know me.
Right.
Like, how do you know what it should be? Yeah, you're wrong because I guarantee you I'm 3 times more aggressive than most people. And that's why you got to get to know people, and you learn. So they learn about me, I learn about them as time goes on, and you tweak things a little bit. So, but the answer, sitting here today looking 6, 12, 18 months forward, I'm relatively positive on things. I mean, you're right. 2 months ago there were some great bargains, right?
Right.
But
so the last thing I was going to say, Art, was. Because you were talking about maybe a little tweaking. That's what you just shared with us. But again, the same message that we've said, again, this is 2 years, so 52 times, 52 episodes, and it's...
Stick with the plan.
Stick with the plan, although tweaking is not the worst thing in the world.
No.
Well, and our plan was to wrap this up right now. So, Art, again, episode 52, Taking Stock, is in the books now.
Yeah. Again, thanks for a great 2 years.
You're welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, listeners out there, thank you so much for listening in. That will wrap it up for Taking Stock, episode number 52. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Taking Stock with Art Jarvis. Join us again in 2 weeks for our next edition. Taking Stock with Art Jarvis is a presentation of Loveland Beacon in partnership with Jarvis Global Investments, LLC. Jarvis Global Investments, LLC is a registered investment advisory firm. The advisor is not attempting to furnish personalized investment advice or services during this production. Individuals should fully investigate the appropriateness of any investment before investing. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Investments may lose value.